I thank God Almighty for helping us to conduct this webinar on behalf of the Department of English under the leadership of Mr. Sijo Joseph Chenelil and Reverend Father Joshi Chiramkuri CMI, the principal of KZMT.
Before we begin the session, I request all the participants to take note of a few guidelines in order to ensure the smooth conduct of this webinar. I request all the participants to mute your audios to avoid any kinds of disturbances.
All the questions that are intended for the Q&A session are to be posted in the chat box, addressing it to everyone.
A feedback form will be posted at the end of the webinar in the chat box of both Zoom and YouTube.
E-certificate will be issued upon the completion of the feedback form and will be mailed to you within 5 days.
Now, I invite Ms. Tanuja Teresa Charlotte of second year BA English for the welcome speech. Over to you, Tanuja.
A bright good morning to each and every one of you participating in this webinar. At the outset itself, I need to stress clearly that the topic of this webinar, titled Bollywood Narrating the Nation, is a novel one which gives us all exposure to the visual and popular culture of today in a unique manner. This initiative does bring to us further insight into the celluloid world of various hues and colors. The task assigned to me today is to welcome all the respected dignitaries who are part and parcel of this webinar. First of all, our dear principal, in his absence, all in all of KCMT, Reverend Father Joshi Chiramkuri CMI, who is a personality of academic attunement, a humane heart. Through his incredible managerial skill, humble ways, forthright attitude, humble ways and mentality, straightforward dealings, and down-to-earth behavioral patterns, he has endeared to all the persons he has come to across his life. I welcome you warmly to this webinar, dear Father. Honorable Blaise Johnny is a critic of renowned tone and tenor. At present, he is a research scholar in the School of English and Foreign Languages at Gandhiram Rural Institute, Tamil Nadu. He has been conferred with many prestigious awards at national and state levels for his contributions to the world of film criticism. He has specialized in the areas of film studies, culture studies, and popular culture. His formidable articles on films have adorned the pages of many international journals of reputed nature. Through his academic credentials, meticulous ways, insightful views, and visionary mindset, creative mentality, aesthetic sensibility, artistic bent of mind, and profound knowledge regarding many things, today he stands as a towering personality in the world of literature. When we requested him to give a talk in this webinar on the topic concerned, he has responded to our proposal in a spontaneous manner. I wholeheartedly welcome you, respected sir, to this webinar. Mr. Sijo Joseph Chenelil, Head of English Department, KCMT, is an individual of calm demeanor, lovely attitude, positive frame of mind. I warmly welcome you, sir, to this webinar. I also welcome Ms. Chasmi Maria Chaco and Ms. Sharon Sobi Verghese, who have played pivotal role in organizing this webinar. I also welcome English department teachers such as Mrs. Sheena Susan Baby, Mrs. Veena Maria James, and all the other teachers of KCMT to this webinar. I also extend my hands of welcome to all the participants from different colleges here in Kerala and beyond to this webinar. I also welcome all the KCMT English department students to this webinar. I hope that you will all have a fruitful session in the next 1.5 hours. Welcoming you all to this webinar once again, let me wind up. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanuja.
I now invite Ms. Chasmi Mariam to introduce our speaker.
Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. I hope it is clear. Am I audible?
Yes, Miss, you're audible.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Respected Principal, Reverend Father Joshi Chirankuri, CMI, our dearest HOD, Josa, and my co-coordinator, Sharon, my dear students, and the respected faculties, research scholars, and the professors who have entered this webinar session. I have a great opportunity today because I'm given the chance to introduce a speaker for today's session. So I'm moving on to my objective. Blaise Johnny is an award-winning film critic and a doctoral research scholar in School of English and Foreign Languages, the Gandhigram Rural Institute, deemed to be University, Tamil Nadu. He received the National Award for the Best Film Critic and the Kerala State Film Award for the Best Article on Cinema in 2018. Also, he backed the Kerala Film Critics Association Award for the Best Article on Cinema in 2017 and 18. His areas of academic and research interests include film studies, cultural studies, and popular culture. He has published academic articles on cinema in Chalachitra Samiksha and other mainstream magazines like Madhyamam, Samakalika Malayalam, Pachakudira, Chandrika, etc. Moreover, he is co-editing a book on cultural studies and is a practicing translator. He has completed post-graduations in English and Malayalam from School of Letters, MG University, Kottayam, and MPhil in English from Madurai Kamaraj University. He received Maulana Azad National Fellowship for Research in 2016. He was also awarded the Sahapedia UNESCO Fellowship in 2020. So it is our honor and privilege to welcome Mr. Blaise Johnny for today's session. I welcome you, sir, and we are all with the ears to hear your topic, which is very interesting, Bollywood narrating the nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chasmi Maria Chaku. So now we'll be moving on to the most awaited part of the webinar. Our speaker of the day, Mr. Blaise Johnny, is National and State Award winning film critic and doctoral research scholar in the School of English and Foreign Languages of the Gandhigram Rural Institute, deemed to be University, Tamil Nadu. With the utmost pleasure, I invite Mr. Blaise Johnny for the session. Sir, please.
Good morning. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
And I take this opportunity to thank the members, faculty members of the department, of the English department, Kustujodi College, Changanashiri, the principal, and all other participants in this webinar. We'll have it, and I take this up, and I consider this as an opportunity to share some of my insights, or maybe some of my ideas regarding cinema for the next maybe a couple of minutes, maybe. Okay. Then, first of all, I'm happy that Kustujodi College has taken initiative in organizing a webinar on cinema. Of course, cinema is still a very popular medium, and unfortunately, in the literature departments, we have a tendency to sideline, or we do not consider cinema or film studies as important as when you compare it with literary studies. And in my personal opinion, maybe because of my exposure, I personally feel that along with literary studies, film studies also has a great opportunity and possibility in contemporary academics. It is because uh, film studies is also a part of our society, and literature. In a way, film studies is also trying to incorporate the various possibilities, various elements from the society, and we are trying to make a new reading of our society through films. And we have a good number of possibilities. Apart from the technical aspects of films, we have the sociological and cultural aspects. How are they being projected in a cinema? And all these things come into discussion when we start delving into the area of film studies. And I personally uh, congratulate all, the organizers, the conveners of this session, because they have taken much pain and strain for conducting this. Chasmi is well known to me. She was my junior and in Gandhigram, and I especially thank Chasmi for inviting me to this session. And above all, I should thank the presenters of the session. I mean, the student community of this college, because they have given me a marvelous introduction, and I thank you for this. Okay. Now let me move on to the. I don't want to give you a lecture actually. My plan is not to give you a lecture, and in fact, I will be giving you some of my ideas regarding the Bollywood cinema and nationalism. Of course, I would like to I would like to say it in advance that it's not a theoretical analysis of certain films, and I believe that this is not a venue for an what do you call to exhibit the theoretical perspectives behind the Bollywood cinema or those things. But let me share some of my ideas, which have been in my mind for several years, maybe for last couple of years. And this is actually a very serious topic that has to be discussed in the contemporary Indian society and scenario. Um, After the emergence of so-called Hindutva ideology in India, in the contemporary Indian society, cinema is also being used as a tool for promoting or propagating this particular idea. And in cinema has been attracting a wide group of people into the masses. It's a medium of masses, of course, and this will in turn create a sort of in Althusserian terms we can call in the Gramscian terms we could call it creating a common sense among the people. So I would like to, first of all, I would like to examine the popularity of the cinema being popular, and what is particular about Bollywood cinema. So now let's begin this discussion with just by examining the how Bollywood is being projected as Indian cinema, where India is a land of many diverse cultures, cinematic sensibilities, and tastes also. But unfortunately, when we start speaking about the so-called Indian cinema, we reduce the possibilities to just to the Bollywood cinema. And why is it so? The reasons could be, we could trace the reasons from the very history of Indian cinema itself, the beginning of Indian cinema. When we examine the history of cinema in India, of course, you are all well aware that the first movie was Raja Harishchandra, which came out in the year 1913. And it was also a silent movie. You must notice that it's also a silent movie, but it came out from a Hindi-speaking belt. Of course, that movie came out from a Hindi-speaking belt, though it was a silent movie. But just after 3 years, maybe in 1916, there was a movie from the southern part of India, that is from Tamil Nadu. The movie was titled Kijagavadam, that came out in 1960. After the first movie in India that came out in 1913, the second movie came around 1916 itself. But somehow we are not so generous in giving that status to the Tamil or other regional industries. We always have a tendency to glorify the Bollywood cinema as Indian cinema, as a so-called Indian cinema. I should put it in quotes. Okay, the so-called Indian cinema is now being, of course, there are a very good, even when you examine from the industrial perspective, we have a tight competitions from a Telugu industry as well as from Tamil industry also. But somehow we still call them call the Indian cinema as I mean taking examples from the Bollywood cinema. That should be the first thing that we should problematize or we should question here. And then, as we move on to the further in relevance or further areas in this film studies or in association with Bollywood, it is nothing other than the excessive interest taken by the Bollywood directors or Bollywood industry to project the nationalist ideals. That is what it makes the Bollywood the what they call the so-called projected face of Indian cinema. And uh, in short, it has wide area of release. Of course, it has the Hindi language, though it is confined to the Hindi language speaking belt. The possibility of releasing a Bollywood cinema is now beyond borders. It is now exported to even to foreign countries as well as to the southern states also, and even Kerala. And in my personal experience in Tamil Nadu also, Hindi movies have a great market. They are even dubbed into Tamil movies, Tamil language. So in that case, the so-called Bollywood industry is now having a wide range or wide area of circulation, so that within this, we should examine the Bollywood industry in this particular perspective. What I'm trying to focus on the first half is that there is a sort of a symbiotic relationship existing between Bollywood cinema, nationalism, and the business related to cinema. These three are actually in a symbiotic relationship. That means one is mutually in relation with the other, a sort of symbiotic relationship. I hope that you understand what I mean by symbiotic relationship, because what do you call it? The give and take, the elements of exchange that is going on in the Bollywood film industry is very much in association with the changes in the national Indian national politics. Okay. Now, my second, I would now like to focus on the concept of nationalism. Of course, we are well aware that there are a good number of theoretical perspectives in association with the concept of nationalism. Maybe I would like, as I mentioned before, I don't like to quote or make it into a what you call the so-called an academic session. This is just a sort of a critical exchange, what you call an exchange of ideas. That's all. So apart from quoting anyone, I would like to put forward certain ideas put forward by Frantz Fanon on nationalism. Certain ideas on nationalism put forward by theoreticians like Frantz Fanon, Benedict Anderson, and Partha Chatterjee. By taking all these their their ideas on nationalism into concern, I would like to put forward a very different position on nationalism. I would personally say that this is not my definition, but in fact, I have been influenced by the ideological and ideas of these particular theoreticians. Now, I would like to define the nationalism as a set of dominant discourses which bind a group of people together and which converts its participants into citizens, and moreover, it keeps a distinct group of people as a potential other. I would like to explain this particular thing. It is a set of dominant discourses that binds a set of people together. When you take into consideration the contemporary Indian situation that is related to the Citizenship Amendment Act and all, there are certain norms and criterions put forward by the government to bind together a set of people, and only those people come into this particular group, and they are actually participants in this particular group, and they are attributed the citizenship. All the other people who are outside these norms and who are not delivered the status of citizenship are actually seen as a potential other. They'll be, in course of time, they will be taken to detention center or whatever be. We have to seriously think on this particular issue. I'm not going into those controversial areas now. I mean, any talk on nationalism would end up in controversy. I don't want to make a controversy now. So let me move on to my ideas. Okay. So there is always a possibility of an what do you call potential other. Only when we have a potential other, the idea of nationalism exist. This is what I personally believe, and this is on this particular idea. The further readings of this particular paper will be progressive. Apart from the visible features or elements like geographical boundaries, citizenship, etc., there is an imaginary possibility that binds together a group of people, and we could call it a sort of collective unconscious. This collective unconscious plays behind in forming this particular group of citizenship, and this is in fact the main reason behind the what you call the projected idea of nationalism. And why cinema? Why are we talking about cinema and nationalism? Since cinema is the most popular and popularized medium that is available in India now, and you are well aware that even the popularized version of cinema could even elect even research the role of politics and the cinema. You can take examples from Tamil Nadu. MGR, the former chief minister of Tamil Nadu, was raised to that particular position only because he was a popular film star. The same was the case with NTR also in the former Telangana. Okay, this is what and the role of cinema plays in Indian politics. And when you have an idea, especially when you have to take it to the masses, cinema could easily do that. This was purposefully and favorably done in the Tamil industry, and it was proven in the case of Tamil industry, because in the earlier, when you analyze the history of Tamil cinema, we could easily understand that the Dravidian politics, the Dravidian ideology was taken to the common people through cinemas of MGR, which were mostly scripted by Annadurai or Kalaignar Karunanidhi or people like that. So cinema is having a very political relevance also. And this is, I was trying to say this, I mean, take example from Tamil Nadu for more easily relating it to our society. We'll be very familiar with the situations in Tamil Nadu than from the North India. So that's why I have taken examples from Tamil Nadu and from other South Indian states. And this is why cinema has an immense power vested in it to convey an idea. If you have a very populist idea to spread among the people, it's cinema would be the best the medium to transform it. During the last Lok Sabha election, just before the last Lok Sabha election, I think there was a movie named PM Narendra Modi, which was nothing other than the main hero was, I think the protagonist was Vivek Oberoi, and it is just nothing other than to project the or to project Narendra Modi as a supernatural human being, and to project his political and his life as something very extraordinary. At the same time, just before the election, there was another movie made in Bollywood, which was started by Anupam Kher, and it was Accidental Prime Minister. The name of the movie was Accidental Prime Minister, in which the former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh was projected in a in a very pathetic manner. I should say it is a pathetic manner because he was projected as if he was he was just like a puppet in the hands of several other political leaders. And I would invite you to watch such movies to have a better picture of what I am saying now. Okay, so what? Let me come back to the main point again. Uh, Cinema is always having that particular power to project or to exhibit or to take certain ideas to the common people in a very powerful manner. So now, in the contemporary India, where the Hindi and Hindutva ideology is in the dominant form, multiculturalism is what is at stake. Multiculturalism. I mean, you are well aware of that the basic principle of Indian democracy is that one of the major principle in Indian democracy is the unity in diversity, and it is this diversity that is being questioned in this contemporary situation. And now we are actually forced to come back from this diverse nature to a monolithic, a monotonous nature. And this ideology is actually sponsored by the right-wing Hindutva ideology. I don't want to mention any particular a particular group. There are several groups, in fact, and this particular ideology of a monotonous and monolithic Indian identity is what is being projected through cinema, through not only through cinema, through various medium. You take the example of the academic curriculum that is being projected in the new educational policy 2020. The same thing happens there also. So we are actually moving into from diverse cultures to a monolithic and a reductionist form of cultural singularity. Okay, and now and let me now move on to the case of several Bollywood movies. Now, when we take the examples, I should start from the very beginning, not just from the contemporary scenario. Of course, these movies may not be so familiar to you. I'm aware of that, but these movies have already attained the cult status in Indian cinema. I should particularly say that it is in Bollywood cinema, but now it is being projected as cult movies in Indian cinema. Now, okay, it is because what are the reasons behind this the so-called cult status? It is just because of the selective, I should put in quotes mark again, the selective nationalist ideals that are being projected in these particular movies. When we examine the history of most of the Bollywood movies, there are several themes that have been repeatedly being projected in them. Some of them are, of course, it's the Indian independence struggle, the freedom struggle, then the nationalism, of course, the idea of nationalism, the wars, of course, the war. There were several wars in between India, China, Pakistan, etc. So these wars have been a theme for several Bollywood movies. The life of defense personalities, then anti-terrorism, the themes related to terrorism as well as anti-terrorist movements. All these have been repeatedly being projected in Hindi cinema, and these have been getting more emphasized than in Hindi cinema than in other regional language cinemas. Take for example, if you take example of Malayalam industry as well as in Tamil industry, we have very less number of cinemas talking about the national issues. We are mostly concerned with the regional issues in our cinemas. There are exceptions, of course. I agree that there are exceptions. In Tamil, you can find such national issues being projected in the movies of Maniratnam, whereas in Malayalam, such issues have been, especially in relation to the military life, these have been projected in the movies of major reviewers. These are exceptions. But when we come to the case of Bollywood cinema, we don't have any exceptions there. We should say that almost the 80%, maybe more than that, most of the cinemas are in a way dealing some sort of ideas which are relevant to the nation as a whole. So this could be another reason. This is, I am not saying that this is something what do you call is a genuine attempt from the part of the Bollywood film industry or the Bombay-based cinema industry. This is purposefully an attempt to project itself as uh, the cinematic face of India. The Bollywood purposefully utilizes such themes related to India, and it projects itself as the national cinema of India. Now, let's examine the history of cinema, which deals with some themes related to nationalism and what you call so-called freedom struggle, etc. It started around even after, just after the Indian independence. I'm now just mentioning a few movies that that just came out after the Indian independence struggle. There was a movie named Shaheed, which came out in 1948, not the recent one. There was a movie that came out in the same with the same title 2 or 3 years before. I'm not speaking about that movie. I'm talking about the Shaheed, which was directed by Ramesh Saigal, and it was starred by Dilip Kumar, the popular film star of that period around in the 1950s. This movie came out in the year 1948, and this movie projected the life of a sacrificial hero who was ready to sacrifice his entire life for the sake of Indian independence struggle. And it is from this particular point, I should say, the Bollywood cinema was able to understand the potential of projecting the national issues into its area of narration. In 2 years, just 2 years after that, in 1950, another movie named Samadhi, which was also directed by Ramesh Saigal. Again, it came out, and this movie also dealt with the same area. I mean, it also dealt with the the British Japan War and the INA, the Indian National Army. Themes like that were repeatedly being projected just after the Indian independence struggle. This was, I'm saying that this is not this was a particular attempt, a purposeful attempt to emerge as the face of India, the cinematic face of India from the part of Bollywood. And now I would like to mention about another movie, which was titled The Mother India, that came out in 1957. And I think most of you might have heard about this movie. It is a what you call one of the most academically discussed and debated movie in India. It is just because right from the title, the movie is titled Mother India, and right from the title, it has to be questioned. This movie, in which Nargis Dutt played the role of Radha in this particular movie, and she was projected as the epitome of sacrifice, motherhood, the ideal Indian woman, etc. And in course of time, the idea of motherland and the sacrificial woman, etc., were created, or it was constructed with taking as Nargis, or the character played by Nargis, Radha, as a typical example. And that is what I mean. Mother India has. That is what I'm trying to say. Mother India has greater relevance than many other movies because it was a cult movie that was able to project a concept of ideal woman, or the stereotypical mother or woman, or ideal woman in India. And still, if we move on, we could say that several issues, political issues, political issues also started to be a theme, were also adopted by the Bollywood. Several political themes were also adopted by the Bollywood into its narration. One among that is, of course, the war that India fought with its neighboring countries. In 1962, there was an India-China war, and there was three wars between India and Pakistan. That was in 1965, 71, and 1999. And these wars, and of course the so-called the constructed enmity between these particular neighboring nations has been the theme for several movies. And I would like to say a few, what do you call, like to say a few movies like Prahar, there was a movie, and Border. I would like to say these are some of the examples that I could recollect now. Prahar and Border are some of the typical movies, war movies. I should say there are war movies, and these movies are now being treated as the so-called examples of Indian nationalism. How are they being projected on silver screens with the life of defense persons? And I think Sandesh Aati Hai, there's a song from Border, and it was one of the main popular songs that was very popular in television as well as in radio at the time of release. Even now, it's popular in YouTube also. Sandesh Aati Hai, and I'm not a good singer, of course. I should say that. And now I'm taking a great leap. I should say I'm taking great leap from the 60s or 70s to the 90s, to the 1990s, and to the early 21st century, where I'm choosing this particular period because it is the period in which the Khan trio, of course, you are well aware of that, Shah Rukh Khan, Amir Khan, and Salman Khan, they were the hot cakes in Bollywood in this particular period. Even they continue even now. And I'm taking this particular period of 1990s to early 21st century in Bollywood industry. I'm well aware that I'm leaving behind the the period of Amitabh Bachchan, just because of the want of time. Because if you want to give a lecture on Amitabh Bachchan, I think there is a possibility of an entire session. An entire session should be taken for speaking on the contributions of Amitabh Bachchan, or the filmic representations of Amitabh Bachchan in cinema. And for the want of time, I'm not moving on to the particular area. But just I would like to mention a few points regarding to Amitabh Bachchan also. It is because most of the movies, you're well aware that the angry young man, he was called the angry young man in Indian cinema. And his movies were mostly popular, especially the movies like Diwar, Sholay, etc., were very popular during the period of Indian emergency declared by Indira Gandhi. And it is this political background. It is in this political background that the movies of Amitabh Bachchan and his stardom should be discussed in detail. But I am not actually moving on to that particular area. My focus will be more on the Khan trio as well, and Akshay Kumar. Okay. After the what do you call, the romantic period, I should call the romantic period of Shah Rukh Khan. Still, he remains as a romantic hero in Bollywood industry. But after the so-called movies like Basigar or something like that, okay, Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge, Shah Rukh Khan emerged into the Bollywood industry as a very powerful superstar. And we must think what are the factors playing behind the superstardom of the three Muslim or Islamic identities in the Bollywood industry, where mostly the decisions are being made based on caste as well as on a religious basis. There are several areas to be discussed. I'll be focusing only on a few areas now. Uh, of course, Shah Rukh Khan's a change in sensibility. The change in sensibility in Shah Rukh Khan's movies could be witnessed, or he started dealing with the national issues in his movies like Dil Se, which came out in 1998, and movies like Mehuna, Veer Sara, then Chak De India, etc. And these movies were able to problematize the idea of nationalism as well as the situation or the identity of an Islamic representation, identity of Islam in India. Uh, and this is what we should seriously think now. How are the Muslim representations being done in Bollywood? Especially when we have three major superstars from that particular religion itself. And I'm now focusing more on the stardom or the representations, various filmic representations done by Shah Rukh Khan, Amir Khan, and Salman Khan. In the movies that I already mentioned, in movies like Dil Se, Mehuna, Veer Sara, and Chak De India, there is always a Muslim personality, a Muslim character who is being marginalized, who is being ridiculed for being a Muslim or for his identity, and that was what you call that was the politics that was induced in the movies of Shah Rukh Khan. It was, I should say that it is a purposeful attempt. In the movie My Name Is Khan, which came out in 2010, this idea was projected to the topmost level. That it is the what do you call the background or the backdrop of that particular movie is not in India. However, it was in USA. But the concept of the Muslim identity or the how they are being vulnerable, how they are being made vulnerable in a world where what do you call the so-called where they are looked upon as suspiciously are being projected in such movies. You might have, I think most of you might have seen that movie, My Name Is Khan, where he says, "My name is Khan, and I am not a terrorist." And this is what repeatedly happens throughout. What do you call in the case of every Muslim in India are being looked upon suspiciously just because of what do you call for just being in that name, for being in that community. And this is and from this particular point, I would like to say that after 2010, after the release of My Name Is Khan, Shah Rukh Khan actually came back from this particular ideology, and he didn't move on with the political inclusions, such minute political inclusions in his further movies. And this was hereafter taken up by several other co-stars, several other popular movie stars in India. The the position of or the vulnerable position of Muslims in the post Babri Masjid and the post Gujarat Riot India is being projected in the cinemas of Amir Khan and Salman Khan in two different ways. Both of them are repeatedly being asked by the fundamentalist Hindutva fundamentalist that they have to every now and then they are repeatedly asked to project their allegiance and faithfulness to the country every now and then. And I must say that these two heroes, these two actors, they have done it in two different ways. Take for example, let's talk about Salman Khan. Salman Khan has taken a middle stand. I must say that he has taken a middle stand throughout his films. He never dares to question the what do you call the so-called dominant ideology that is being circulated in our society regarding what do you call the vulnerability of Islam or he never dares to question such popular myth or beliefs. And for example, when we take movies like Ekta Tiger or its sequel Tiger Zinda Hai, uh, there is there is actually a love relationship, a relationship between the spies of two countries. Of course, it's India and Pakistan, and he actually manages to what do you call, to take a very different path, not into this political area. But of course, he's actually dealing with the question of identity throughout in his movies. But he has taken a safer position when compared to many other his contemporary film actors. And Tiger Zinda and Ekta Tiger, of course, these two are movies that deals with India-Pakistan relationship, and uh, these are action movies. That is also yet another thing to be noticed. He was apart from the other two, Amir Khan and Shah Rukh Khan were not projected as action heroes in Bollywood industry, but Salman and Akshay Kumar was like that. And again, this but Salman Khan was also asked to prove that there is a warm relationship that exists between India and Pakistan. And you could find such justifications in these movies like Bajrangi Bhaijaan, which came out in the year 2015, and in a movie named Bharat, which came out in 2019. In these particular movies, he purposefully, and I think Bharat was produced by himself, the Amir Khan himself, and where he tried these movies through these movies, he's trying to say that it is not enmity or it is not separatism that is in operation, but it is a sort of a warm relationship that exists between India and Pakistan. And it is comparatively, it is a safer position taken by Salman Khan. And what is that? I must mention that. Hope, and I think some of you might have seen the movie Tubelite also, which came out. I think it came out in the year 2018, where there is an Indo-China Bhai relationship, and again he's taking again a very safer position when we deals with when he dealt with very complicated or controversial areas of on nationalism. And this is not the case with Amir Khan. Amir Khan, Amir Khan's movies were in fact were daring. I should say it was almost all his movies were a daring attempt to question the existing ideas on nationalism and so-called projected myth on Indian nationalism, etc. Right from his movies like Lagan, that which came out in 2001, he started what you call taking a very different path, which is which is much different from the so-called projected or highlighted way of nationalism. That continued even in movies like Mangal Pandey, which came out in 2005, and in 2006 he came out with another movie, Rengde Basanti, where he questioned the concept of where he questioned the social evils like corruption and even political. What do you call? There were several scandals also at the time. I mean, these movies were in a way related to Indian politics also, since there were several scandals in relation to the military departments at that time. The movies like Rengde Basanti targeted or were able to project such scandals in relation to the Indian military service. And in 2014, he came up with a very controversial movie, which was very harshly criticized by the Hindu fundamentalists for questioning and it was actually criticized or by the what you call the fundamentalist or orthodox mentality people for making it religiously sensitive issues. The movie was speaking, and it came out in the year 2014. And in 2016, he came up with Dangal, yet another issue where nationalism was, of course, nationalism was being projected, but it was in a very different way. how women should be empowered, how women are actually being how and to what extent were women to be promoted in India. And the same issue was being discussed from in the movie The Secret Superstar also. There he was daring. It was a daring attempt to question the orthodox mentality that is being existing in the Muslim community also, the Islam community also. He was in a way this. I mean, I should say that Amir Khan's movies were a daring attempt to question the so-called the fraudulent ideas that are being in circulation in both with almost all the religious communities as well as in politics. And Rangade Basanti, right from Rangade Basanti to Secret Superstar, uh, he has been purposefully trying to include these elements into the area of his filmic narratives. Also, while mentioning this, I must say that the political differences, the ideological stance, and the differences of Salman Khan and Amir Khan is very evident in their choice of television reality shows. Also, both of them are very popular in the television reality shows as anchors. When Salman Khan preferred to be the anchor of a very popularized version of Big Boss show, Amir Khan chose to be the what do you call the anchor of the show Satyameva Jayati, where several issues which are being what do you call kept under cover, which are being kept under cover for the sake of the prosperity, for the sake of projecting the national prosperity, was being discussed in the show called Satyameva Jayate, where female infanticide, then rape, gang rape, honor killing, etc., were being discussed. And I must say that these choices of being the anchors of two different television reality shows, or also is actually what do you call is also a representation, is also trying to prove their sensibility or the political ideology to which they are affiliated to. Then when we come to the movies of Akshay Kumar, uh, I must say that there are two separate innings in his career. Earlier, so in fact, there are three separate innings in his career. Earlier, during his early years in Indian cinema, he was a daring action hero, and then there was a what do you call a sudden fall from the height. Actually, then he was not at all. Then he didn't have a market in Indian industry for several years. But in his second innings, which started, I think, with this accompaniment with director Priyadarshan, several movies like Bhul Bhulaiya, Singh is King, all those movies came out, and he again emerged as a very powerful superstar in Hindi industry, in Bollywood industry. And when we ask now, our focus is actually on his third innings in his cinema career, and which started in 2014. I must say that was the year in which the BJP, the first BJP government led by Narendra Modi, came into power. It was in 2014 itself. Akshay Kumar came up with this movie Holiday. It was a remake of a Tamil movie Tupaki, and it was directed by A.R. Murugadoss himself. And the movie the very interesting thing is the Tamil movie Tupaki didn't have a subtitle, not a subtitle. I mean an extension of the title. But the Hindi movie Holiday had an extended title, or an extended title. What you should say, you should give more attention to that title itself. A soldier is never off duty. This is the second part of the title. Holiday. A soldier is never off duty. So what is that particular thing? When a movie which was already made in Tamil and which was a success in Tamil. When it was remade into Hindi, why are we giving it more what do you call relevance with regard to the life of a soldier? This is what we should take into consideration, because in Bollywood we cannot say that we cannot what do you call bring out an idea without which is related to nationalism without mentioning the problems faced by uh, the hero himself. Actually, the hero Virat Bakshi, I think the name of the character was Virat Bakshi. Uh, he was on a holiday to his home from the military service, but still he was forced to what do you call to safeguard his country. And this is actually, I mean, a powerful narrative in which the actors like Akshay Kumar are trying to project himself as a national hero. And through a series of movies which came after this movie Holiday, he was able to project himself as a national icon of what do you call the so-called the projected nationalism. Then came movies like Gabbar is Back, which was in 2015, and the same year again he came out with another movie, Baby. In Gabbar is Back, I mean, both these movies are actually targeting the middle class sensibilities of the Hindi movie viewers. It is because as for the especially for the middle class people, the major issues that are being that are disturbing them, the major issues in India that are disturbing them are, of course, it is corruption and terrorism, and both the issues are being dealt in these movies respectively. Gabbar is Back is actually talking on corruption, whereas the movie Baby is talking on the issue of terrorism. In 2016, he came out with again two more movies. Both of them were biopics, and we have to discuss the politics of biopics in very detail. And it is yet another topic of discussion. And I'm sorry that I don't have much time to spare for that. But the politics of biopics should be dealt in very detail, because it is actually cultivating a notion of an ideal man, ideal person, ideal nationalist. These movies, especially the movies of Akshay Kumar like Rastam and Airlift, which came out in 2016, tried to project an ideal Indian, an ideal Indian man, an ideal Indian soldier, ideal Indian citizen. This concept of ideal, that has to be problematized here. And the same trend that is being continued now, even now. I'm not just mentioning all the movies. I mean, you might have seen almost all these movies. I'm just saying these names of these movies just because I want to say that there is a purposeful idea from his part to select themes uh, that are being what do you call it? Purposefully. He has been selecting certain themes to project or to bring out the concept of ideal Indian citizen. And again, the same tendency continues in movies like Naam Sabana, then in Gold, which came out in 2018, and in the 2019 movie Kesari. Uh, and I think Kesari should be mentioned a little more, because there is also a very political reason behind that. You are well aware that Kesari is a movie on the Sikh regiment during the British India. The fight, the what do you call the resistance, the fight they put in to resist the British what do you call and to resist the Afghan. Sorry, I mean the Afghan Muslims, the Muslim intervention that during the British India. That was the main thing. The central theme of that particular movie, Kesari. I must say this because there is a major state, Punjab. Punjab is actually a major state that has not yielded to the the BJP supremacy till now. It is being ruled by the under the Congress and under the International Congress till now, and to attract or to get the attention of the Sikh people, uh, I must say this is a political agenda set by the what you call the masterminds behind the movie to attract or to valorize the Sikh spirit, the Sikh life and the spirit and the efforts put by them in Indian freedom struggle. And of course, they are not actually against the British in that movie. They are against the Muslim intruders, the Muslim Afghan intruders. And this is how a particular idea is being projected, how certain a group of people are being projected as others, not as others, and in Bollywood movies. Then in course of time, this particular popularity of Akshay Kumar was utilized by uh, the Bollywood cinema to project certain ideas or certain what do you call the certain ideas put forward, certain ideas of the central government, especially the projects like Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, and all. They were being projected on silver screen by Akshay Kumar, and movies like Toilet Ek Prem Kada and Batman. And he's almost like a poster boy. He has already attained a poster boy status, just like a cover girl or something, cover boy, cover page man, and all. He has already attained that status, and his movies have been repeatedly being hailed for projecting the central governmental policies, like the so-called Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. And now, these are I have already mentioned the filmic representations of various groups in the movies of Shah Rukh Khan, Amir Khan, and Salman Khan, especially, and also Akshay Kumar. Then there comes yet another hero who has repeatedly done certain investigative officer's role in Bollywood cinema, and it is yet another form of what do you call a poster boy status in Bollywood cinema, and it is none other than John Abraham, and the movies like Madras Cafe, Satyameva Jayate, Paramanu, and Romeo Akbar, Walter, then the movies of Vicky Kaushal, the star of Vicky Kaushal, star of the Uri, the surgical strike. All these movies have nothing other than to project the so-called nationalistic spirit that are being projected by the dominant ideologies in India at present. You might have seen that movie, Uri. It has nothing other than to justify the surgical strike, which is being hailed as one of the greatest achievement of the BJP-led government now. And the movie just was almost like a justification done on that particular strike. And just now, when we go again, let me point out one more movie that was by Kangana Ranaut. I think the Manikarnika. You might have seen that movie Manikarnika also. Recently, I came across an article written by Kanja Elaya that was on the casteism in Bollywood cinema, and he has observed that there is actually a retrieval or a purposeful attempt from certain groups to bring back the Chadurvarna system in Bollywood cinema back. Of course, there are powerful Brahminical communities as well as powerful OBC communities in Bollywood cinema industry, but the Kshatriya community in Bollywood is not as strong as the other groups. So there is actually a particular purposeful attempt to re-energize or to bring back the Kshatriya group or the Kshatriya ideology. And recently she has already made certain controversy. Even 2 days before, I think she made a controversial statement. Kangana Ranaut made a controversial statement regarding the agricultural bill. She said that all those agriculturists or all those people who oppose the agricultural bill are should be called terrorists. How can a person say like that? Just because you have a very different opinion from the what do you call, the ruling party, or you don't have you have you're also in democracy, you are also given the right to dissent, also. When you have a difference of opinion, how can someone say that those who have a difference of opinion are just terrorists? And this is how, and a particular and Kangana Ranaut, I personally believe that Kangana Ranaut is now actually spearheading the movement to re-energize the Kshatriya community in Bollywood industry. and and it is I'm just quoting the ideas of Kanja Elaya also. And now let me come to the conclusion part of this session. And of course, I already mentioned that the contemporary Indian nationalism is branded as essentially an outcome of Hindi Hindutva association. When a particular language, when Hindi or is getting more dominance above other regional languages, like especially like Malayalam or Tamil or Bengali or even Northeast, there are several other cultures, several other languages, several other groups of customs and practices that are in circulation in India. But when a particular group of customs and a particular language like Hindi or Sanskrit is being projected or given more importance, both in cinema as well as in society, other groups are becoming vulnerable or is at stake. In a way, when we are trying to reinstate the hegemony of Sanskrit and Hindi, many other languages and cultures are being marginalized. And in a way, the Sanskritization process, that is being projected as what do you call as a goal of the present government. And you might have noticed that last year, 3 deemed to be universities were given central university status, and all the 3 deemed to be universities were Sanskrit universities. And now they are all central universities which function for the development of Sanskrit, and no other universities were given status last year, of status of the central university last year. And this is how we have to politically examine the what do you call the happenings that are going around us. Every agencies of critical thinking are being Sanskritized now. That is one major observation that I would like to put forward. Every agencies of critical thinking, all advances in science and technology, all advances in critical human thinking are actually now being Sanskritized and are becoming homogeneous in nature. One nation, one language is actually a policy that has been advocated by the BJP government right from its beginning. One language and one country is not actually the essence of our constitution, which guarantees the diverse and heterogeneous cultural existence. And unfortunately, we are actually moving behind. We are actually stepping back from the guarantees offered or the promises offered in Indian Constitution. And Just because if you are moving on with this particular policy of one India, one language policy, several cultural groups, several minority cultures, several sexually or what you call people with different sexual orientations, and linguistic minorities, religious minorities, all their existence would be at stake, or they will be questioned. They would always will have to live uh, in a situation of being scrutinized. Any time they could be stopped and questioned, and their existence is always vulnerable. And this is how a sort of anxiety or a sort of anxiety, and how a potential other is being created inside your country, inside in your own country. This is how a different group of people, if not us, uh, you are someone different. This is how a group of people are being marginalized in a particular society. And when we when we set a group of norms or for standardizing a version of nationalism, several other groups will be filtered and they will be cornered. To attain this, there are several, of course, there are several ways to for the what you call the fundamentalist groups to attain this. One among that is, of course, it is education. But on another version, cinema or the powerful popular cinema could be utilized as a vehicle to attain this nationalist version, which is set up in a Hindutva ideology. And this is how we should see Bollywood cinema. We should start critically examining every projected or every celebrated notion of every celebrated representation in any whatever be. I mean, especially in the case of Bollywood cinema. The same has to be applied in the case of web series also. I'm not actually moving on to this particular area, but since we are all here to, since we are all, most of us will be interested in cinema as well as in web series. So I would like to suggest some of you to seriously think on the misrepresentations and how, to what extent it is being a sort of what do you call very different opinion of nationalism is being projected in web series also. And with this, I would like to conclude my session. And thank you all for your patient listening. And thank you. Jaspi, hello.
Thank you so much, sir. That was a wonderful presentation. Now, we are moving on to the Q&A session. Relevant questions from both Zoom and YouTube platforms will be selected. Me and Shekha will read out the questions, and sir, you can answer them.
Fine.
Sir, the first question is from Suchitra Mishra. The question is, to what extent Bollywood narrations of the nation is realistic?
Okay. Should I answer it at present, or should I give the answer at the end of all the questions? Which one do you prefer?
No,
Okay, I'll give you the answer now. I mean, realistic is actually a very different or a very what do you call, a very problematic question. Is any representation on cinema realistic? That should be the first thing that we have to consider. And I think realistic, apart from realistic, I would say that a representational value has a very important role in film studies, especially in film studies. When we are able to project or misrepresent a particular community, or when we are able to project a particular person in a very supernatural way, it could easily attract the masses without any question. They are not. See, cinema is actually a monologic communication, a monotonous communication. We actually project certain ideas, and we are not getting instant responses from the people. It is not something like a play or it is not a dialogic communication. Of course, there are dialogues in cinema, but the medium is not dialogic in nature. So when we are able to project what do you call, a very unethical or a very different idea, or a very cornering type of idea through mass movies, uh, it's not about the question of reality in that. People are fascinated. People become very fascinated to that, and they easily take it into account that they take them. It is able to make believe. The cinema is able to make believe certain ideas, which they are forced to think as reality. Of course, I'm not saying that cinema is something very much realistic or something, but people, they easily they could be manipulated. Their thoughts could be manipulated just by certain projections, or just by certain representations.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Abhishek Prasad. The question goes like this: is Bollywood only trying to focus on the North Indian issues? How can we say that it represents the whole
Sorry,
nation?
sorry, I couldn't hear the question. I mean, can you
Okay, I'll
repeat once
repeat
more?
it once more.
Okay.
Is Bollywood only trying to focus on the North Indian issues? How can we say that it represents the whole nation? The cultural diversity is still an issue in Hindi films.
Of course, that is what I am trying to say. I mean, it is trying to project certain issues which are actually dominant in our society, and in fact, the Bollywood cinema, there is a change in sensibility. I must also mention that also. There is a change in sensibility in contemporary Bollywood cinema also, especially when it comes to the movies of Anurag Kashyap, the movies enacted by Irfan Khan and Nawazuddin Siddiqui. We could find a very different version of nationalism or those things in it. But the blockbuster movies, or the so-called projected blockbuster movies, in which powerful superstars and which are trying to monetize certain principles, certain ideologies. They are repeatedly projecting certain things, excluding the diverse nature of Indian society, uh, which is monotonous. That is what I am trying to say. There are several other issues to be addressed, and in fact, there is a change in sensibility in Bollywood cinema at present. We should not neglect that. Uh, but when compared to the other side, it is negligible. I should say that. There was a movie called Newton. It was 2 years before. I don't remember the name of. I mean, in which year it was released. But the movie Newton, or Manji, the Mountain Man. So there are several movies in which most of them are biopics, even biopics, where we could find a very different version of Indian nationalism, Indian life. There are several other lives in India. The movie Aligarh, in which Manoj Bajpayee played a role of a homosexual professor, and it is another version of Indian life. I'm saying, what I'm trying to say is that cinema should be more open. Cinema should include diverse lifestyle, diverse culture, than projecting a particular monolithic or monotonous life or culture. That's all. Any other questions?
Sir, the next question is from Tarini Ramalingam. The question is, if Bollywood takes cinema as a propaganda to enhance nationalistic ideas and make audiences to dance to their tunes, is this project the face of India as yet to develop in front of world countries?
Um, I must say, this is actually a very interesting question. See, we are actually no at present. I don't know how we are being projected in front of the world countries now. Uh, if I make a statement, it would be very much related to my political stand. But since this is an academic session, I don't want to bring out my political version into it. But somehow this is serious questions that is to be thought. Um, when we are actually sidelining or we are neglecting several other aspects in regard to with regard to this what do you call Bollywood, we are actually projecting only very few and very few themes which the ruler which the ruling community or which the ruling parties or the dominant groups in our society wants others to see about us. uh, I hope I'm able to make it clear, because we want to just project what others what we would like to show about us. We don't want to show the others in India, others within India. We want to just project us, and this us includes none other than those who are in power. That's all.
Sir,
Okay.
the next question is from Chandran.
Okay.
The question is, can Slumdog Millionaire be taken as a realistic national representative of Indian cinema?
I must say that Slumdog Millionaire is actually a very different movie. It is not a Bollywood cinema. In fact, it is a Hollywood cinema. In a way, we should call it a Hollywood cinema, and that is why that movie got so much of accolades and all those things. Mm, I must say that is a Westerner's view on India. That's what I personally feel. A Western, of course, that's an adaptation of a novel also, but how we want, how a Westerner want to see India. The same thing we could easily see in the say certain web series also, because in web series, in certain Indian web series which are being sponsored by or which are being telecasted in Netflix and Amazon, they try to project an India with the perspective of a Westerner's eye, very what you call an Orientalist view, Orientalist view. Then the question of reality is something a very problematic one. It's actually a very problematic one, and mm, I think this is. I think I have given you an answer, because it is actually a perspective of the Westerner, and only because it was it is a perspective of the Westerner, and it was made as a Hollywood cinema. It was able to win prestigious awards like Oscar and all.
Sir, the next question is from Ms. Sharon Sobey. The question is, in the backdrop of movies like Padmavat, how is history misrepresented in Bollywood movies for propaganda?
Okay. Actually, we must not say that Padmavat is actually a historical movie. It is actually a literary
How
work.
is Bollywood film industry and
Hello?
Hindi being?
Hello?
Yes,
Am I
sir, you are
audible?
audible. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
okay. In fact, actually, I don't remember the name of that literary text actually, but Padmavat is not actually a historical cinema. It is actually a mythical creation, which was projected as a historical cinema, and it attained what do you call it attained the national attention just because Karnisena, I think it was Karnisena or Rajput Sena, whatever it is. I mean, they came up with a great opposition, saying that they were trying to misrepresent the Rajput community. And I must say, this was a purposeful, or only because by creating such controversies, certain myths could exist, and in course of time, the existence of such myth could attain the status of history. After several years, there could be what do you call serious discussions or academic discussions or even history narratives on the fictional characters. We have certain examples in front of us. I don't want to get into that. And but in if that was not being questioned, if the critical mindset of the viewer or academic bodies in India are not addressing it. In course of time, even movies like Padmavat could be hailed as histories. I personally believe that that is just a what you call a fictional character in a particular literary work. I mean, I'm sorry that I could not recollect the name of that particular book, uh, but sooner or later, I believe these mythical characters will also attain historical status. Thank
Sir, the next question is from Vipin Chandran. The
Okay.
question is, how is Bollywood film industry and Hindi being the symbol of India across the globe? Does it have anything to do with the films that are made in Hindi being constantly nominated for popular awards?
Can you repeat that question once again? I
Yes,
mean,
sir.
okay.
How is Bollywood film industry and Hindi being the symbol of India across the globe? Does it have anything to do with films that are made in Hindi being constantly nominated for popular awards?
I think that was what I was trying to say all this time. I mean, because certain movies that are being projected as the what do you call the epitome of nationalism or the so-called celebrated versions of nationalism uh, is what Bollywood is trying to do for for the past several years, maybe for the last 70 years. It has been trying to project itself as the face of Indian cinema. And in case of the celebrity awards and all, it is yet another strategy actually. I mean, when we examine the popular culture or when we deal academically with popular culture or cultural studies, the first thing that we should keep in our mind is the relevance of power. How is power in operation in these particular areas? It is actually a sort of manipulation. Manipulation is the word that we have to highlight here. Certain ideas need to be projected, and in fact, there are PR work, there is public relations work, advertisements, repeated projections. There could be artificial or created controversies. All this and even award functions are also taking part, is also playing their part in projecting what you call a so-called the designated or the so-called highlighted nationalism. Um, the people in power want a certain ideas to be projected, and only those will they will make sure that only those ideas will be repeatedly in circulation in the academic as well as in social discourses. For example, if you take the example of the television channels, the newsroom debates like the debate conducted by Arnab Goswami in Republic TV, all the other participants are being silenced, and he just creates a havoc there. He just wants he repeatedly he says that the India wants to know, and he never allows anyone else to speak. And this is how what do you call the so-called representation of nationalism is being done in India, and how they are being projected in India. And this, I think this would be the answer for that.
The next question is from Teresa Thomas. The question is, Bollywood is also notorious for its portrayal of things in an explicit manner, which to an extent gets them favorable reach inside and out of India. Couldn't this be yet another reason for considering Bollywood as the face of Indian cinema?
Explicit in the sense, I mean, the question was not clear. I mean, explicit in the sense,
Especially in item numbers and songs?
maybe okay. But see, we are actually. Have you seen such item songs and all, or item songs or item numbers in any other language films, in any other world language films other than Indian cinemas? In my limited view of viewing of cinema, I haven't gone through much because sexuality is actually considered as a taboo in India, whereas it is not such a thing in other countries, especially in the Western areas. I'm not talking about the other Asian countries. I'm talking about the Western cinema. When sexuality, when it is considered as a taboo or as something very sacred, and when it is kept as a very holy thing or sacred thing, of course, this projection of such things um, will affect the popularity as well as the market interest of cinemas in India, especially the Bollywood. But I don't think that is the reason for the projection of Bollywood cinema into the world of in the world cinema, because people won't be so interested in watching such things. What do you call, the taste culture of Indian society and the Western society is much different. And when we come across such Western movies, I think we should have a serious rethinking on this particular area, because uh, the elements of popularity in Indian cinema and in Western cinema is something very different. And Mm, of course, item dance, item numbers can be a popular elements, can be a popular element to attract people throughout India, in Indian market at least. Not, I don't think it will be. It's a selling point in the Western industry and the Western movie market.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Bipin. The question is, how far are these propagandist movies an attempt to monetize nationalism? There is also a second part to this question. The second part is, propaganda is clearly not an exclusive for Bollywood. In Hollywood too, we can see the
Uh,
American first propaganda. How is it different
uh,
from the recent propaganda movies from Bollywood?
First question was clear. I mean, I think the nationalism is actually being monetized. There is no doubt in that. Uh, it's because, uh, especially in the Bollywood industry, it is the producers as well as the directors and even the actors. They are well aware that the certain elements, certain ingredients have wide reception. What do you call it? Certain spices, which is what you call indie spices or indie masala, will be having greater reception in India when compared to many other areas. One among those ingredients is none other than nationalism. And can you repeat the second question?
Yes, sir. The second part is, propaganda is clearly not exclusive for Bollywood. In Hollywood too, we see the American first propaganda. How is it different from the recent propaganda movies from Bollywood?
In fact, there are, I mean, every popular industry, any popular movie industry will have their own propaganda to be projected, and in fact, they want it to be monetized too. Uh, when you examine the Hollywood industry, especially the American film industry, uh, you come across a set of movies like the Avengers or the what you call the comic movies, where they consider themselves as the superhero or the super savior of the world. They want the Americans want us to believe that they are the supreme power. They export. I mean, I read somewhere. I don't remember what it was, and it is nothing other than the Hollywood movies that brings most of the revenue in American economy, because it is one of the most exported product from America. Uh, Apart, it is not just a movie; it is an idea also. I mean, the idea of the supremacy of America is also being exported, and in fact, I don't find much differences. The differences is when we compare Bollywood and Hollywood. Differences would be what do you call in the way they apply that. That's all. Both of them want to project a sort of nationalism and to monetize that. We actually we don't have a big market outside India when compared to the Hollywood. But the Bollywood industry has market all over India, and they want to project that the nationalism advocated by the Hindutva Hindi belt is actually the real what do you call the real projected nationalism, is the nationalism that has to be accepted by everyone, where very less opportunity is being provided for the other voices, the voices of the other.
Thank you, sir. The next question is raised by Amrita Balakrishnan. The question is, are movies merely mirroring the society rather than creating new norms?
We cannot say that it's actually mirroring. Mirroring is just it's actually a reflection. In fact, in the contemporary academics, we are least bothered about how certain things are being reflected. Even when we take the example, when we consider literary studies, I don't think that we are now really bothered about how life is getting reflected in literature. In fact, we are now mostly seriously discussing on representational how representation is going on, how representation is being done on literature as well as in other mediums. Even in the case of cinema, apart from reflection, I personally believe that what we have to seriously think and what we have to problematize is nothing other than representation. And the reflection is comparatively an older an older perspective. We are actually now bothered about representation, and representation is something very different from what we call reflection. I think I have given an answer for that.
Yes, sir. Thank you. The next question is from Matthew Emmanuel. The question is, you have mentioned the deep devotion of nationalism and culture, particularly in cinema. This, what would say against the Hollywoodization process or in defense of globalization? Do you agree?
In fact, and that's what I was trying to say. After mentioning the Bollywood cinema of the early 60s and 70s, I actually take a great leap. I discarded a big what do you call it, a big span of time, which included film actors like Amitabh Bachchan, Dharmendra, Sanjay Dutt, sorry, Sunil Dutt, then what do you call Sunny Deol. I didn't mention about them. I'm really aware of that. But I directly came to the film industry of the 90s, where we are actually into the post-globalization period. The 90s and the post-90s, even the early 21st century, the cinema attained a very different perspective. Cinema is no more a regional thing. It's no more it has wider borders. In the borders are being opened, and it has immense possibilities now. And of course, there have been positive as well as what do you call negative areas that has to be discussed from the perspective of globalization. And I actually didn't go into that particular area because it is yet another very deep topic that has to be dealt in very detail. That's why I didn't mention those areas in my what do you call in my talk.
Thank you, sir. The next question is raised by Om Prakash. The question is, do you think it is difficult for females to stand in the industry safe, especially during a struggler period?
Yeah, that is the question is nothing has nothing to do with the area of today's discussion. But in fact, I personally believe that this not only cinema, even our society is actually governed by so much of patriarchal norms, and there were several allegations or controversies. So, what do you call in relation to this particular area? There were discussions on sexual what do you call misuse of female artists. Everything. Me Too campaign was there, and and there were a good number of what you call female artists who came up with serious allegations or against the what do you call the female the male co-actors or whatever be. And in fact, it is not just cinema; it is everywhere. I mean, the existence of the still even now, I believe that it is not so easy for a woman to survive independently in India, which is still under the clutches of patriarchal norms.
Thank you, sir. There are so many wonderful questions pouring in from our participants, but due to our time constraints, we are compelled to come to an end to this wonderful session. I thank each and every one of you for your active participation. And once again, thank you, Mr. Blaise Johnny, for that informative and thought-provoking webinar. Now, I request Ms. Beena Shiju of third year BA English to propose the word of thanks.
Am I audible?
Yes, Beena, you're audible.
Yes.
Good afternoon to all of you. A great webinar on a topic of burgeoning importance in the field of literature has come to an end. The duty assigned to me is to accord vote of thanks to all of you who have participated in this webinar. First of all, Reverend Father Joshi Chiramkuri CMI, the principal of Christajodi College of Management and Technology, who is an esteemed individual of lovely manners, optimistic view of life, and self-effacing attitude. He has made his presence felt all throughout this webinar here. I thank him from the bottom of my heart for being here. Thank you, dear Father. Respected Blaise Johnny has taken us into a world of various intricate aspects of the topic of this webinar titled Bollywood Narrating the Nation. Through his spontaneous articulation, interactive approach, lively presentation, in-depth analysis, and looking at the topic from all conceivable angles, he has made this webinar so worthwhile and interesting. Thank you so much for your invaluable exposition on this crucial topic. We really appreciate it. Mr. Sijo Joseph Chenelil, head of the English department of KCMT, is a man of candor and free and frank nature. I express my gratitude to you, sir, for being part of this webinar. I also thank the brains behind this webinar, Mrs. Chashmi Maria Chaco and Ms. Sharon Sovi Verghese, for organizing this program in such a splendid and stellar manner. I would also like to thank Mrs. Sheena Susan Baby, Mrs. Veena Maria James, and all other KCMT teachers for being part of this webinar. Last but not the least, I express my heartfelt gratitude to the students of the English department of KCMT for their wholehearted support and hard work in order to make this event possible. And above all, I thank all the discerning participants of all other colleges in Kerala and beyond for taking time off your busy schedule for being part with us today. Thanking all of you once again for everything, let me conclude.
Thank you, Beena. We have now come to an end of this webinar. On behalf of the Department of English and Christajodi College of Management and Technology, I thank you all for being a part of this webinar. Thank you.